Silent frequencies. There is a particular kind of silence that falls over an operations floor when analysts realize they are no longer looking at ordinary criminal traffic. It is not a silence born of quiet. The servers hum. The cooling systems push cold air through raised floors. The keyboards never truly stop. It is the silence of held breath. The silence of people who have just understood that what they are reading was never meant to be read. That silence fell across a Fort Meade signals analysis unit on a Tuesday morning in early autumn. An analyst, 7 years in signals intelligence, 3 of them focused exclusively on cartel communications infrastructure, had been staring at a traffic anomaly for 11 days. Not because the anomaly was subtle, because it was the opposite. Because something about the pattern was almost too clean, too deliberate. And in signals intelligence, when something looks too deliberate, it usually means someone has worked very hard to make it look that way. The anomaly had first appeared in routine monitoring of encrypted application traffic. Crossing a cluster of cell towers along a 400-mile corridor running through the American Southwest, NSA Cyber operations maintain passive collection infrastructure capable of identifying unusual traffic signatures. Not the content of communications initially, but the shape of them, the rhythm, the cadence. The way packets move across networks tells analysts things that the people generating those packets never intend to reveal. A cartel soldier sending a brief check-in message produces a different digital signature than a logistics coordinator confirming a shipment window. A financial handler discussing wire transfers moves data differently than a field operative receiving target photographs. These distinctions are invisible to the untrained eye. To a trained signals analyst, they are almost as legible as language. What the analyst had found was a custom-built encrypted messaging application. Not one of the commercially available platforms that criminal organizations had long favored, and that NSA Cyber had long since learned to work around. This was purpose-built software, proprietary encryption, a closed network. Whoever had designed it had done so with the explicit intent of making interception impossible, and by every surface-level assessment they had come very close to succeeding. NSA Cyber assigned a dedicated technical team to the problem. 6 analysts, 2 cryptographic specialists, and a software reverse engineering unit that had spent the previous 4 years dismantling some of the most sophisticated communication architectures used by international criminal organizations. They did not break the encryption in a day. They did not break it in a week. The full technical decryption effort took 9 months. 9 months of incremental progress, of dead ends, of partial breakthroughs followed by setbacks. Of the kind of sustained analytical grinding that produces no dramatic moments but eventually produces results. The first decoded messages arrived on a Thursday. By Friday, the team lead had requested an urgent briefing with senior operations staff. By the following Monday, those briefings had escalated to the directorate level. What 9 months of decryption had unlocked was not a window into a criminal organization. It was a window into a criminal empire, and into a specific concrete operational plan that was, at the moment of decryption, already in its final stages of execution. The application had been in operation for 4 years and 3 months. In that time, it had carried an estimated 340,000 individual messages across a network of 487 confirmed participants operating across 11 American states, 3 Mexican states, and nodes in Guatemala, Honduras, and Colombia. The network was not a single criminal operation. It was an integrated criminal infrastructure, a cartel communications backbone that coordinated drug distribution, contract enforcement, territorial disputes, financial management, and most critically, organized violence. NSA Cyber analysts began the process of reconstructing the network's architecture from decoded communications. What emerged over the following 2 weeks was a detailed structural map of an organization that had operated with near-complete security for more than 4 years. The upper tier comprised a core coordination group of 23 individuals. Below them, regional commanders managed operations across geographic territories, each with their own sub-networks of field operatives, logistics coordinators, financial handlers, and enforcement teams. At the bottom of the structure were the operational soldiers, the people who moved product, collected payments, and carried out violence on instruction. The scale of what the decoded messages revealed was staggering even to analysts who had spent careers examining organized crime. Over the 49 months the application had been active, the network had coordinated the movement of approximately 4,200 kilograms of fentanyl and fentanyl precursors through distribution chains reaching 27 cities. Financial flows traced through intercepted communications indicated operational revenues of approximately $780 million. The network had, according to decoded messages, been directly involved in the coordination of 147 acts of violence, including murders, disappearances, and targeted intimidation operations against law enforcement personnel, rival organization members, and civilians who had been identified as threats or liabilities. These were the historical findings, the record of what the organization had already done during the years the application had been operating without detection. But it was the recent messages, the ones from the final weeks before decryption, that made the analyst request the urgent briefing. Something was being planned, something large. Something that the decoded messages described not as a routine operational action but as a structural event. A reorganization of power achieved through coordinated simultaneous violence on a scale the organization had never previously attempted. The operation had a name. The decoded messages referred to it simply as the alignment. The alignment, as reconstructed from intercepted communications, was a synchronized multi-city elimination campaign targeting 94 specific individuals across 8 cities in 5 states. The targets were not random. They had been selected with operational precision over a period of approximately 6 months. Each target had been identified, surveilled, photographed, and assessed. Target packages, digital dossiers containing photographs, home addresses, vehicle descriptions, daily routines, family member information, and the locations of businesses, schools, and recreational venues frequented by both the target and their immediate family, had been compiled and distributed through the encrypted application to designated enforcement teams. The 94 targets fell into 4 categories. The first category comprised 31 members of rival criminal organizations operating in territories the network intended to absorb. The second category comprised 22 individuals the network had identified as law enforcement informants or suspected informants, people who had, in the network's assessment, passed information to federal or local authorities. The third category comprised 19 business owners, financial professionals, and legal representatives who had, at various points, either refused to cooperate with the network or were believed to have provided assistance to investigators. The fourth category, and the one that produced the most alarmed response from NSA Cyber analysts, comprised 22 individuals who had no apparent criminal or law enforcement connection at all. These were family members, spouses, parents, and in 11 documented cases, children of individuals the network considered to have committed irrecoverable offenses against the organization. The decoded messages were explicit. Target packages for the fourth category included school schedules, bus routes, daycare pickup times. NSA Cyber analysts identified the operational timeline from communications in the 72 hours preceding full decryption. A series of coordination messages between the upper-tier command group and regional commanders established the operational window with specificity. The alignment was scheduled to begin at 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning, with all teams across all 8 cities initiating simultaneously. The final coordination message, decoded approximately 58 hours before the scheduled operational start, confirmed that all 94 target packages had been distributed, all enforcement teams were in position, and all operational materials were staged. The message concluded with a single instruction: proceed as coordinated. The decoded intelligence was immediately escalated through NSA Cyber's interagency coordination channels. The FBI's Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force received the full intelligence package within 4 hours of the critical timeline messages being decoded. The DEA's Special Operations Division was read in simultaneously. Given the multi-state nature of the operation and the involvement of participants in multiple federal jurisdictions, the Marshals Service and ICE were brought into the coordination structure within 6 hours. The interagency task force that assembled around the NSA Cyber intelligence had approximately 54 hours to work with before the alignment's scheduled start time. The coordination challenge was significant. A preemptive operation targeting enforcement teams, command personnel, and logistics nodes across 8 cities and 5 states required simultaneous action to be effective. If any element of the network received advance warning that authorities had penetrated their communications, the organization would scatter. Target packages might be executed early, in an uncoordinated rush before the window closed. Warning would be transmitted through channels outside the compromised application, and the 487 identified network participants would disappear into new communication structures that would take months or years to penetrate again. The task force operated under a strict information security protocol. Knowledge of the NSA Cyber intelligence was compartmented to a small number of senior personnel in each participating agency. The operational planning was conducted through secure facilities. The field teams assembled for the operation, ultimately numbering over 400 federal agents coordinated across the 5 affected states, were briefed only on their specific operational assignments and not on the source or full scope of the underlying intelligence. The operational plan called for 23 simultaneous raids across the 8 cities, targeting command and coordination nodes that NSA Cyber had identified as critical to the alignment's execution. Secondary teams were assigned to the locations where enforcement teams had been staged, based on coordinates and addresses decoded from intercepted messages. Protective details were quietly established for high-priority targets in the 4th category, the family members, without alerting those individuals to the specific nature of the threat. The raids began at 1:30 Saturday morning, 90 minutes before the alignment's scheduled start. Over the following 4 hours, 23 coordinated operations unfolded across Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, California, and Nevada. The operational results exceeded the task force's best-case projections. 312 individuals were taken into federal custody. Among those arrested were 19 of the 23 identified upper-tier command and coordination personnel, including the 3 individuals whose decoded communications had planned and directed the alignment operation. 17 regional commanders were arrested at their identified locations. Enforcement teams that had been staged for the alignment's execution were intercepted at or near their operational positions in 6 of the 8 targeted cities. Physical evidence recovered in the raids included 94 printed target packages, the complete dossiers on every alignment target, including the children, weapons caches totaling 47 firearms, including semi-automatic rifles and suppressed handguns, vehicles that had been pre-positioned for operational use, and critically devices that contained the encrypted application, providing additional forensic evidence of the organization's communications history. 2 enforcement teams in 2 of the 8 cities were not intercepted before departing for their assigned targets. In both cases, law enforcement personnel following real-time intelligence updates were able to intercept the teams en route. No alignment targets were reached. 94 people went to sleep that Friday night unaware that their names were on a list. They woke up Saturday morning not knowing how close the margin had been. The 11 children whose school schedules had been included in target packages went to their weekend activities without knowing that their routines had been studied by people who intended to use that information to harm them. The full scope of what NSA Cyber's 9-month decryption effort had prevented extended beyond the alignment itself. The 340,000 decoded messages provided investigators with a comprehensive historical record of 4 years of criminal operations. The 487 identified network participants gave federal prosecutors a map of an organization that had previously been investigated only in fragments. The financial intelligence embedded in decoded communications allowed federal agencies to begin asset tracing and forfeiture proceedings against approximately $340 million in identified criminal proceeds. In the weeks following the Saturday morning operations, additional arrests continued as the task force worked through the intelligence provided by decoded communications. Informant penetration cases were re-examined in light of the network's own internal security assessments. Law enforcement personnel who had been identified as targets in the alignment, people who had been doing their jobs without knowing that their names had been distributed to enforcement teams, were briefed on the threat that had been directed at them and the operational action that had intercepted it. The technical achievement at the center of this operation, 9 months of sustained cryptographic and analytical work to break a purpose-built encryption system that its designers had believed to be impenetrable, represents the kind of capability that criminal organizations consistently underestimate, and that legitimate intelligence and law enforcement operations depend upon. Criminal networks operate on the assumption that sufficiently sophisticated encryption creates a permanent barrier between their communications and the people who would hold them accountable. NSA Cyber signals intelligence operations exist to test that assumption. The testing is not fast. It is not simple. It requires sustained investment in technical capability, in human expertise, in the patience to work a problem for months before results emerge. But encrypted signals carry content, and content, however well protected, can be reached. The 340,000 messages that passed through the alignment network over 4 years told a complete operational story. Logistics, finances, command decisions, enforcement actions, and eventually a specific plan to kill 94 people on a Saturday morning in 5 states. That story was not supposed to be readable. The people who sent those messages believed they were communicating in permanent privacy. They were wrong. The interagency coordination that followed the intelligence package's distribution was, by every subsequent assessment, a model of exactly the kind of multi-agency information integration that NSA Cyber signals intelligence is designed to enable. The challenge was not that different agencies had different capabilities or different jurisdictional concerns. Those differences are routine and manageable. The challenge was that the intelligence was extraordinarily sensitive, the operational window was extremely narrow, and the consequences of any security failure in the planning process were potentially catastrophic. If the network's internal security apparatus detected federal interest in its operations before the Saturday morning raids, it had several options that would have been deeply harmful. It could have accelerated the alignment's timeline, executing the operation in the hours between detection and federal response. It could have activated a subset of the enforcement teams before authorities could position protective resources for the 94 targets. It could have sent warning signals through secondary communication channels outside the compromised application, to the members of the network who had not yet been located or identified, allowing them to disperse before arrest operations could reach them. Any of these outcomes would have been a partial or complete failure. The task force's operational planning was built entirely around preventing them. Senior FBI personnel assigned to the task force spent approximately 18 hours, working through a Thursday night and into Friday, constructing the raid sequencing logic. The problem was essentially one of dependency management. Which nodes in the network's command structure, if arrested early, would generate detectable signals of disruption that might alert other nodes? Which operational teams, if their staging positions were observed to be under surveillance, would relay warnings through means that could not be intercepted in time? The task force built a raid sequence designed to neutralize the network's capacity to communicate internally before any individual node could transmit a warning. NSA Cyber provided real-time monitoring support during the planning phase. flagging any new traffic on the encrypted application that might indicate the network had detected the operational preparation. No such traffic was detected. The network continued its pre-operational communications. Final team confirmations, last-minute logistics adjustments, equipment checks, completely unaware that the application it had spent 4 years trusting had been open to federal analysts for weeks. The hours between the final task force briefing on Friday evening and the 1:30 operational start on Saturday were, by multiple accounts from participating agents, the most tension-concentrated period any of them had experienced in their careers. Over 400 federal personnel were in position across 5 states. Protective details were established near the homes of the highest priority 4th category targets. Raid teams were at their pre-positioned staging points, waiting for the synchronized launch command. The network, meanwhile, continued its final pre-operational communications. NSA Cyber analyst monitoring the application traffic in real time. Watched the network's command tier exchange final confirmations. Regional commanders checked in with their enforcement teams. Logistics coordinators confirmed that operational materials were in place. The application carried the organization's confidence that Saturday morning would proceed exactly as planned. At 1:28, the Task Force Operations Center transmitted the synchronized launch authorization. At 1:30, 23 operations began simultaneously across 8 cities in 5 states. The analyst who first flagged the traffic anomaly 11 days before the decryption breakthrough later described the moment when the first decoded messages came through, not the operational realization of what the messages contained. That came later in the briefings and the escalation and the urgent task force assembly. The first moment when the decryption results returned and the characters on the screen resolved into language, into actual words that actual people had sent to other actual people, believing that no one else would ever see them. That moment, the analyst said, felt like opening a door. Behind the door was everything the organization had done and everything it was planning to do. Behind the door were 94 names and 94 target packages and the operational schedule for a Saturday morning that would have changed those people's lives in ways they could not have anticipated and did not deserve. Behind the door was the alignment. NSA Cyber opened the door 9 months before it was supposed to be too late. The alignment never happened. This is a fictional dramatization inspired by signal intelligence and cyber operations concepts. No real cases, individuals, specific methods, or NSA operations are depicted. All characters, organizations, operational details, and events described are entirely fictitious and are used solely for narrative and illustrative purposes.